After 3 races, Max Verstappen finds himself sitting 6th in the World Drivers' Championship, but still is talked about as Charles Leclerc's closest rival. And let's face it, it's definitely not where the world champion would have wanted to sit in the table after 3 races this season, but he has still shown incredible pace in the 2 races he has DNF'd from. Obviously coming in 2nd in Bahrain and coming in 2nd again in Australia would make this table look a lot different, picking up 18 points apiece, 36 points over 2 races, would take that 46-point deficit that Max Verstappen has and turn that into a 10-point deficit, which would look a lot better for the Dutchman moving forward. Unfortunately for Max Verstappen, those points have been lost. Those points cannot be gained back. And I want to delve in today whether or not it is too late for Max Verstappen to put together a title challenge. And in my opinion, there's kind of 3 things to talk about here. The number of DNFs. How many DNFs can you actually get away with over the course of the season and still mount a title challenge? Second is Charles Leclerc's wins. The fact that Charles Leclerc has won 2 of the first 3 races. Is there a pattern emerging between winning the first couple of races in a season and going on to be the world champion? And then finally, also the points gap itself. Is 46 points already too many points for Max Verstappen to overcome? Let's talk about the DNFs first and how many DNFs world champions have had in the past over the course of their seasons. I'm going to go back to the Vettel era of Formula One, the last time a Red Bull was at the top. Back in 2010, Sebastian Vettel actually had 3 DNFs in the 19 races and still was able to go on and win the championship that year. It was incredibly close in 2010, but he managed to pit people to the post, even with 3 DNFs, so more than Max Verstappen has right now. If we then look at his subsequent seasons, though, in 2011, he only had 1 DNF over the course of 19 races. In 2012, Sebastian Vettel again only had 1 DNF over the course of 20 races this time. And then in 2013, his final championship year, he picked up that 4th championship with just 1 DNF in 19 races. So even though he had 3 DNFs in that first season, he then also only had 3 DNFs over the next subsequent 3 seasons. So it shows that you can have those DNFs in a Red Bull and still pick up a championship, but it's less likely to happen. And that kind of pattern progresses as we move into the Mercedes era. If we look at Lewis Hamilton in 2014, he had 3 DNFs, but finished on the podium in every single other race of the 19. In 2015, he had 1 DNF and only 1 6th place, again picking up a podium at least in every single other race in those 19 races. Nico Rosberg in 2016 had 1 DNF, and that was the real changing point between him and Hamilton. Hamilton had 2 DNFs over the course of that season and missed out by only 5 points. So 2 DNFs in 21 races is what cost Hamilton compared to 1 DNF for Rosberg. 2017 saw Hamilton go with 0 DNFs in 20 races. 2018, he only had 1 DNF in 21 races. Again, Lewis Hamilton, 2019, 0 DNFs in 21 races. And then in 2020, he technically had 0 DNFs as well, but missed out on a race because of COVID-19. Final example is Max Verstappen himself, who last season in 2021, there were 22 races and Max Verstappen actually DNF'd in 3 of those races. So he was able to still go on and win the championship, even if it was in the final race of the season, just about, even with 3 DNFs over the year. But if we look at that spread of data, you can see that there's only 3 times that a driver has been able to pick up 3 DNFs and go on to win the World Championship. And we've seen that those DNFs can be the difference between winning and losing a championship. If we look at Hamilton versus Nico Rosberg in that 2016 season, and similar for Vettel in those seasons with Ferrari as well. Those DNFs and those lower finishes were what caused him to lose out on those championships. But it's definitely still possible. There's a lot more points up for grabs this season. There's a lot more races this season than any of those seasons previously. And of course, there's the additional points because of the sprint races as well that Max Verstappen can still pick up. So especially if teams and drivers have reliability issues later on down the line, maybe Charles Leclerc picks up a couple of DNFs himself, the championship is still very much open for Max Verstappen. I think then we have to delve into whether or not Charles Leclerc is likely to have those issues, because at the moment, he looks absolutely incredible. 2 victories out of the first 3 races this season, and it's been incredibly impressive along the way too. He's picked up the first Grand Slam for Ferrari since 2010, and just absolutely decimated the field in Australia. But is there actually a link between winning the first couple of races this season, or winning the first few few races of a season and actually going on to be a world champion. And it's a little bit more split than you would think. Again, going back to that Vettel era, in 2011, Sebastian Vettel won 2 out of the first 3 races and went to be a champion. In 2013, he won 2 of the first 4 races and went on to be a world champion. 2014, Hamilton won 2 out of the first 3. 2015, Hamilton won 2 out of the first 3. In 2016, Nico Rosberg actually won all 3 of the first 3 races. In 2019, Hamilton won 2 out of the first 3, and in 2020, Lewis Hamilton won 2 out of the first 3 races and went on to be the world champion. So there's 7 seasons there where the driver who's won at least a couple of the first 3 races has gone on to win the championship. But you might have noticed there's quite a few seasons missing, and that's because in 2010, Sebastian Vettel won 0 out of the first 3 races and went on to win a championship. In 2012, Sebastian Vettel again won 0 out of the first 3 and went on to win his 3rd world championship. In 2017, Sebastian Vettel won 2 out of the first 3 races and still lost the title to Lewis Hamilton. In 2018, again, Sebastian Vettel won 2 out of the first 3 races in a Ferrari and lost the title to Hamilton. So there might be a little bit of history repeating itself here, where a Ferrari wins 2 out of the first 3 and then goes on to lose the championship to another title contender. And then, of course, in 2021 last season, Hamilton won 2 of the first 3 races and lost the title to Verstappen himself. So it's almost half of the time where the world champion of that year doesn't dominate the first 3 races in particular, and actually sort of catches up to the rest of the pack over the course of the season and generally comes out quicker towards the end of the season, where those points really start to rack up and where the pressure starts to build on the drivers in the field. So just because Max Verstappen hasn't been able to pick up the majority of the wins, and just because Charles Leclerc has picked up 2 out of 3 victories so far, it definitely statistically doesn't show any real correlation between winning the first few races and going on to be a world champion. It's definitely still up for grabs for Max Verstappen. The final hurdle to then think about for Max Verstappen is that points deficit that I started this video talking about, the 46-point gap between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, and whether that is already an insurmountable amount of points. Now, obviously we have to caveat this a little bit. The fact that this is a longer season than we've ever had in Formula 1 before, and we've got the additional points from the sprint races, which we've only had last year, and those points have been increased from last year anyway. So there's very much a different dynamic, but let's just look at the amount of points and whether or not this amount of points has been caught up in the past. In the era that I've been discussing throughout this video, the kind of last 10 years or so of Formula 1, the largest point gap that has been overcome was actually Sebastian Vettel in the Red Bull. In 2012, he managed to come back from 44 points behind to clinch his 3rd world championship. And yes, it took an exceptional drive, but 44 points is very, very close to the 46 that Max Verstappen already finds himself behind. And actually, if we go even further back, before that, Kimi Räikkönen in 2007, I've adjusted the points obviously for the modern era, overcame what would have been now a 72-point deficit to clinch the title. Obviously, that season was incredibly close between multiple drivers, so maybe, you know, Max Verstappen could have a helping hand from the likes of Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez if they're able to pick up some victories as well and take some more points off Charles Leclerc over the next few races. And the largest points deficit overcome in Formula 1 was James Hunt in 1976. He actually adjusted for modern points and the modern era of points in Formula 1, would have had to overcome a 97-point gap to go on to be the world champion that year. So with 97 points available to James Hunt, I'm sure Max Verstappen can overcome 46 points, even in this modern era of Formula 1, where it is very, very different to how it was back then. I really don't understand why people are saying that Max Verstappen is already out of this title race. Yes, Charles Leclerc is looking absolutely sensational, and as they've talked about in the Ferrari garage, he does look like Charles Leclerc 2.0, but we could still see Max Verstappen 2.0 if Red Bull can stop those deficits, stop those DNFs from coming up, and make sure that he can push them to the end of the season. I think Max Verstappen is in with a really good chance at battling for this title, but I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Is it already too late for Max Verstappen to come back from 46 points behind? And if it is, who do you think Charles Leclerc's main challenger for the title will be? If it's not going to be Max Verstappen, it's got to be somebody else. So who's it going to be? Let me know in the comments down below. Whilst you're there, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I will see you next time.